Hello, hello, hi. Hi, welcome everyone. I'm Matt Turck from Bloomberg Ventures. We're going to jump right into it because we're running a little late. We're actually still missing a speaker, but hopefully everything's going to work out. So for those who have been here in the past, today we're going to do a slightly different format because of the nature of the topics and presenters. So we're going to do it sequentially as opposed to having everybody on stage. So first up is Rick Smolan, who's working on a fascinating project called the Human Face of Big Data. Then we're going to have two spotlights on two interesting, very interesting emerging startups in New York, Mortar Data and Datadog. And then we are very fortunate to have Dwight Merriman here from 10gen, one of the legends of Silicon Alley or the New York tech scene or whatever you want to call it. And we'll do a fireside chat. He's laughing as I say this. We're going to do a fireside chat for about 40 minutes after that. So first up is Rick.
Thanks very much. I'm having a little trouble getting my MacBook Air working here, so I'll do this quickly. I'm a former Time Life and National Geographic photojournalist, and many years ago I was working in Australia and I had this crazy idea. I wanted to invite my heroes and my friends and some young photographers to spread out all over Australia for 24 hours and say, on your market, set, go, let's do a day in the life of Australia. And I took this to 35 publishers who told me this was a completely brain-dead idea. It was stupid. It wouldn't work. Nobody wanted to back it. I got laughed out of the office of 35 publishers. So I ended up going to the Prime Minister of Australia, who had this great idea. He said, why don't you go to private companies and ask them to give you airline tickets and computers and film and hotel rooms? And I said, and why would they give me all this stuff? And he said, because you're going to put their logo in the front of your book. And I said, well, I can't do that. I'm a journalist. That would be, I'd be breaking my journalistic code of ethics. And he said, look, Rick, this is like a PBS special. You don't have to give them any editorial control. Just ask them for resources. So to my astonishment, everybody not in the world of publishing said, what a cool idea. I thought I would do one book and go back to being a photographer, which I loved. But the book became the #1 book in Australia. It was never in a bookstore for the first year. And it led to a whole series of books, which is very exciting. And I started thinking, what if you could take the same concept and instead of a country on a day, what if I could invite all these really talented journalists and get them to focus their attention on an emerging topic like the internet or the global water crisis or how the human race is learning to heal itself? Along the way, we started not just doing books, but we did books, we did CD-ROMs, we did apps, we did websites, we did TV movies, and to our astonishment, these things just became wildly successful. One of the things I didn't understand at all, because I was very naive when I started this, I could barely add up my expenses at the end of my assignments, let alone figure out how to run a business, was that by inviting journalists from Time and Newsweek and Life and Fortune and Stern and OG, that they all went back to their editors and said, I just worked on this amazing project. We should feature it on the cover. So I went from having no publisher and no budget to suddenly having companies, Kodak running full-page ads in the Wall Street Journal, magazines putting us on the cover. It was just, and this is like the died and gone to heaven
I found
moment.
my next favorite thing one day when I was just going through the bookstore. One of my favorite things to do is to go to the bookstore. Y'all heard?
So anyway, it doesn't get any better than that. 80,000 people tried buying the book within 10 minutes. So you know that commercial in the old days where 10 people sitting around saying, oh, we launched our website, and then they said, oh, 100 people came, 1,000 people came, oh shit. That was our website. It literally went up in smoke. So a year ago, I was at All Things Digital, and I was standing around, and I was talking to Mr. Meyer, who's an old friend who was at Google at the time, who's helped us in a lot of our projects. And she said, so what's your next project? And I said, I know, we're trying to figure out what should be the next focus. And she said, you guys should look at big data. And I said, what's big data? And she said, well, some people say it's so much information it doesn't fit on your personal computer. And it's like, okay, doesn't sound very interesting. And she said, okay, how about this? People are collecting huge amounts of data all over the world. She gave me this quote from Eric Schmidt, which is that, actually, it's I think it's this quote. There was all the information collected by the human race from the dawn of humanity in 2003 is 5 exabytes, whatever that is, because I'm not a data scientist. And now every 2 days we're generating 5 exabytes. Well, that much I could understand. I thought, wow, that's pretty amazing. But the thing that finally got me is when she said, basically what we're seeing is the planet developing a nervous system, that all of us walking around with our smartphones, with all these devices collecting data, it's like there's a real-time feedback loop that we've never had before, and it's changing every aspect of humanity. I thought, that's really interesting. But she also told me, and again, the nice thing about being a journalist is you can ask lots of stupid questions, and people are nice enough to take the time to teach you and share their knowledge with you. This idea that everything that can be measured is being measured now. The cost of measuring things and creating data is plummeting to almost zero. And then finally, this whole idea of the Internet of Things, that all these devices are now starting to talk to each other and share data, and we're not the center of conversation anymore. These devices are actually changing their behavior based on each other's behavior. The way that I saw the story being told by the media a year ago when I started on this, which you normally heard big data and then you heard Big Brother. It was like, it's really scary, and they're stealing your credit card information, and they're stealing your passwords, and all of this is really valid and really important. But I sort of felt like just when we did 24 Hours in Cyberspace, it felt like we were just watching something coming alive in a way that we'd never seen before, and I thought, this is really interesting. My son's 9 years old, and he has been seeing me working until very late at night, many nights, on this project, and he walked into the kitchen about a month ago and said, Dad, I keep hearing you on the phone talking about this big data thing. So what is big data? I'm going, oh God, 9 years old. Like, I can barely explain it to myself. So I was like struggling for this metaphor, and I said, okay, Jesse, imagine if your whole life you've been looking through one eye, and all of a sudden, for the first time in your life, you opened up a second eye. So you're not just seeing more, you're not seeing more, but you're seeing it in a different way. You're seeing a different dimension. He said, is that what computers are doing? I said, yeah. He said, so could a computer let you open up a third eye and a fourth and a fifth? And it's sort of an interesting metaphor. And it's funny, I've run this by my friends in Silicon Valley, and people like that. It's like, yeah, that really is what, it's like the stuff's there, but we couldn't see it until we had this other dimension of understanding. So I started thinking, how would you tell this story if you were going to tell it in a lot of different ways? I'm going to go really quickly here. So one of the things I thought is, I found out that basically in the first day of a baby's life, that 70 times the information in the Library of Congress is generated in the course of a day. I also found out that the information that we're exposed to in the course of a day now is as much as somebody from the 15th century was exposed to in their entire lifetime. Also, this idea of the digital exhaust, that all of us now walking around with our smartphones are leaving this trail of data behind us that will never go away. So if any of you are going to run for president, you better remember that everything you do is being recorded and stored, and it's be retrievable for forever. Actually, this picture has special relevance for me because my daughter's 12 now, and I'm already worried about her driving when she's 16. And the small caption here says just the way that Apple has Find My Phone. Progressive Auto Insurance is a little box they'll now put in your car that will actually, if you allow them to install it in your car, they will track your driving time, where you are, how many people are in the car, how fast you change lanes. If you're willing to do that, to install that in your car, they'll give you a discount. So there's this interesting trade-off of convenience for privacy. And then finally, and a lot of the images you're seeing here are the ones that are in this book that we're working on, is that this whole idea of data transparency being amplified by Twitter and Facebook is really changing the face of politics all over the world. I'll give you a couple of examples of things we discovered in the course of doing the book. And of course, you know, at the beginning I thought, how are we going to photograph big data? It's like people sitting in front of computers, data centers. It just sounded so deadly. And then we had almost 22 researchers working on this for the last year, trying to figure out how do you capture this idea of the human face of big data. So the day the earthquake hit last year in Japan, it was obviously just terrible and devastating. I heard a wonderful story that Kai Risdal did on Marketplace about the fact that every bullet train in every factory in Japan stopped 43 seconds before the earthquake hit. So they actually have put in place a $500 million system that actually worked very efficiently. No human beings were involved. It was set up to do exactly what it did. It stopped the bullet trains in the factories. But then I found out there was a small group of entrepreneurs in Palo Alto that have a program called Quake Catcher. So the accelerometer on all of our laptops, that when it falls off the table, it knows it's falling, and it lifts the head off the platter, it actually, you can use that same accelerometer to look for earthquakes. So all over the world now, just the way you've all heard of SETI at home, looking for extraterrestrial life. So this is really delightful. It's like people all over the world are using something in their computer for free to protect each other, and thousands of people all over the world are now running this at
Even
night.
before the...
I won't run that story. I'm going to jump through these very, very quickly and give you a couple of interesting examples. So Sweetak Patel is 27 years old. This is his third startup. He lives in Oregon, and he's a MacArthur Fellow. Imagine if you got your American Express bill tomorrow, and it said, please pay me, you know, $3,576, but there was no itemization. Would you pay that bill? Would anybody pay a credit card bill without what it was you spent your money on? And yet we get our electrical bill every month, and we pay it. We have absolutely no idea what it is we're spending our money on. Well, he wrote a little device. You plug it anywhere in your house, one device, and it can recognize the digital signature of every appliance in your house. So it actually gives you a readout at the end of the month of exactly what you were spending your money on, which is pretty fascinating. My mom is 87 years old, and she's fallen 5 times in the last 4 years. I have little young children, and my brother and sister have kids, and we've been trying to beg my mother to move up and move in with us, but she's, my dad died 5 years ago, and, damn it, she's going to stay in her house in Florida where they spent their lives. So after the 3rd time she fell, I said, Mom, we have to do something. So I hired these women to live with her in shifts, which she hated. They're stealing my garbage bags, the usual stories. I don't think so, Mom. So I went to TED Med, and I met Eric Dishman from Intel, who runs a unit of Intel and GE, have this unit aging in place. And he showed me that they're working on something called a magic carpet. So you install this carpet in the home of your loved one, and it measures how Rick's mom walks. It doesn't say good or bad. It just says, this is how Rick's mom walks when everything's fine. And then on a day where her balance is off, or her gait is off, or she hasn't even touched the carpet, it's 11 o'clock in the morning, the system tweets me and says, you should call Mom. I mean, you should always call Mom, but especially on days like this. Well, then I found out that Jawbone makes this, and there's lots of other companies making these quantified self devices. So my friends who are doctors tell me that 18% of our GDP is being spent on health care now in the United States. And all of my friends who are doctors say 3 years before you're on your way to the ER in an ambulance, your body's been giving off all kinds of signals saying that there's something going on, but none of us want to go see the doctor. So these little devices cost $100, tells me how I sleep, tells me how many feet I walk during the day. Soon they'll be doing blood glucose and all kinds of other things. The idea is that if we're all measuring ourselves and getting data all the time, we may be able to actually address things like the healthcare problem. I'm going to, again, just jump through these things really quickly. These are elephant seals being used to measure the oceans. They have little transmitters on their heads. In Australia, they put 60 of these transponders all over the Pacific Ocean. When these animals swim close enough, it dumps the data into it, goes up to the surface and up to a satellite. These fascinating stories. This is radar operators for years have complained about all the noise in their radar around airports. Birds, bees, bats, insects are trying to filter all this garbage and junk out. And a group of scientists said, wait, you have 10 years of migration patterns of bats and you've been throwing all this away? Are you crazy? So what's so fascinating is that what one person's garbage is somebody else's treasure. I'm going to jump through all these stories really quickly here. We were trying to think of basically how to tell the story of big data. A third of the drugs in Africa today are counterfeit. It looks just like Merck or Pfizer, same packaging, same insert, shrink wrapped, and you buy it and it's sugar or it's worse. So there's a gentleman who invented a scratch-off system here where every single bottle of medicine has a unique code on it. And while you're sitting there at the pharmacy, you buy the medicine, and before you actually walk out of the pharmacy, you type that number in, you SMS it, and it checks it against a database. Every single bottle is completely unique. So we thought, instead of just doing a book, what if we invited people all over the world who are already carrying these little smartphone devices to help us measure the world for 1 week? So we've been working on an app which is being released on Wednesday morning. It's called Measure Our World. It's part of the Human Face of Big Data project. And I'm going to show it to you in 1 second. I'm going to tell you one more story, and then I'm going to jump into it. Josh is getting frustrated with me because he wants me to talk about the app. This gentleman on the top right here has a pacemaker with an IP address on it. So his device actually transmits to his Wi-Fi network in his house and then out to his doctor. Well, he's a data scientist, and he said, I wanted to correlate my diet, my exercise, with the times that my pacemaker actually had to shock my heart back into having a regular pattern. So he called the manufacturer and said, could I get a copy of my data, please? I'd love to correlate it against my activity. And they said, that's our data. You can't have it. And he said, what do you mean it's your data? It's my heart. You've been measuring my heart for 6 months. I want a copy of my data. And they refused. So he's suing them now. So you might say, okay, well, that's kind of an isolated case. But it sort of brings up a bigger issue, which is like, who owns our data? I mean, we're all generating data. All of our smartphones are generating data. We're going to all these websites. There are these browser histories. People are selling our progress through the internet, but we don't seem to have any control over it. So the book talks about the dark side and the downside of data. It's not just, oh, data is going to solve all of our problems. This whole project is actually being sponsored by EMC. This is the company I went to. They've never seen any of these pictures. You're seeing this way before they do. They have no right of review. they've just given us the ability to tell a story of big data, good or bad, and it's really kind of extraordinary to have that kind of, I'm sorry, EMC? They've been great. I also sort of had this interesting fantasy of giving this book away for free to 10,000 of the most influential men and women on the planet. So this book is not, it's being printed in China right now, but I went to the acting CEO of FedEx and I showed him some of the early layouts. And I said, what I'm trying to do here is spark a global conversation about big data in its infancy so that people around the world are actually thinking about this right now while a lot of these issues are still in their formative stages. And to my astonishment, they actually said yes. So on November 20th, we're delivering 10,000 copies of this book to world leaders, Fortune 500 CEOs, heads of media companies, Olympic winners, Oscar winners, musicians. We're coming up with this really interesting list, and our friends at Edelman who are here have been helping us compile this list, which is just thrilling. So let me show you a little bit. I can go on and show you the whole book for hours, but I want to show you the app that we're working on. And let's see here. If I can get it to play in full screen. Let's see. Let's just play it.
Join millions of people around the globe to measure our world using your smartphone. From September 25th through October 2nd, you can share and compare. Map your daily footprint. Share what brings you luck. Get a glimpse into the one thing people want to experience during their lifetime. And discover hidden secrets about the world you live in. Curious what your phone can tell you about your life? Compare answers with millions of others globally. Find your data doppelganger, someone just like you, somewhere else in the world. We'll donate $1 per download to Charity Water for the first 50,000 downloads as a way to say thank you for participating in the human face of big data. Charity Water uses 100% of public donations to directly fund.
So I want to go back to this for a second, and then I know I've got very little time here. The idea of this whole app is actually to let people compare themselves to each other. We're not collecting any personal identifiable data. We're not asking for email addresses. We're going to donate all the amalgamated data at the end for anyone who wants to study it. When we did 24 hours in cyberspace years ago, it was the first website to go into the Smithsonian. So we're hoping that this sort of one day, it's actually a 1 week snapshot of humanity will be something that's kind of interesting. We're trying to make it fun and engaging for people on an individual level. A lot of the questions are kind of, they're very quirky, and you get to actually compare by gender and by location and by age around the world how people answer some of these questions. Let me get to the question so I can actually show you how the app works for a second. So the project has 5 components. Again, I'm just going to show you the smartphone app. So we're letting people use their smartphones to compare themselves to each other and discover things about the world and find out things that your phone actually knows about you. Your phone, for example, knows how many people you pass in the course of a day. It knows the time of day that you're the most active or the most solitary. The app actually asks you to do 3 things. One, it asks you if you'll donate 1 day of passive data. Again, this is completely anonymous. We're trying to see how people move around cities around the world so we can compare that people in New York City move 7 miles a day at 2 miles an hour versus Tokyo at 3 miles a day at 5 miles an hour. We're asking interesting questions. Again, because I have kids, I think about these things all the time. But if you could go in and change the DNA of your child in only one way, would you give them more immunity? Would you give them more intelligence? Would you give them longevity? And that's an interesting question. But then if you could put a layer on top of it, which is how did eldest-born children in China that grew up with a pet that had strict parents answer that question? So the idea is to take these 50 questions. We're going to give people a very limited set of tools of age and gender on the app. But on October 2nd, we're creating something called Mission Control, where we're inviting journalists, any of you who are interested in coming, down at Chelsea Markets. We're building this sort of NASA, kind of at a moon launch kind of environment. We're inviting data scientists and some very interesting people in the data space to come and talk and meet each other and meet with journalists. You get to answer questions. How do you usually wake up in the morning? By rooster, by pet, alarm clock? And then you get to sort of say, how did everybody answer? And then you can actually drill down to it. We're trying to make it social so that when you're answering these questions, you think, I wonder how my college roommate would answer that question, because we used to talk about all that time when we were in the dorm. And then Mission Control is basically like a moon launch. We're basically taking over the room. We're bringing in lighting and stage designers. We've got 6 speakers at the beginning of the morning for about an hour who are sort of experts in the big data space, a very wide variety of areas. And then we're bringing in what we're calling pods. So there'll be about 25 people in the room that are all working in the big data space. And the idea is to have journalists from very different backgrounds, with different audiences, different media, to come and actually talk with people who are sort of, building this brand new world. I mean, we're at the cusp of being able to re-engineer our species. This is the first time in human history we've ever been able to do this. And I think it's a time that we should be talking about this, because there's a lot of decisions being made without a lot of people thinking about it. And until now, a lot of this data has been sort of the purview of corporations and of governments, and I think it's something that ordinary, everyday people should be thinking about. So I think I'll stop there. And sorry for talking so fast. Sure.
So we have time for just a couple of questions.
So what's the app called, and how do we download the app?
Oh, I'm sorry, duh. It's if you go to the www.humanfaceofbigdata.com, the app is there and explains the project. As of Wednesday morning, the 26th, the app will be live. It'll be Android and iOS in 8 languages.
Okay, that was a quick one. So a couple more, and then Rick will be available after
Yeah,
this
I'll be here
to meet with everyone.
Afterwards.
How long is the data going to be? It's not working. How long is the data going to be made available, and are you going to collect it on a longitudinal basis?
We're going to collect it over the course of a week. So it begins on the 26th and goes through the 2nd. We're probably going to leave the app open so people can continue comparing themselves. But I sort of, as you can tell, I sort of like this idea of a snapshot of time. It's sort of, it's a one trick pony, but it's a really good trick. So I like this idea of taking 1 week and then making that available for people to study. I think maybe, I hope somebody else will take this and do it every 10 years and sort of compare it.
Okay. So just a quick question. So my understanding is that you're going to make all of this data available for download. Is that correct?
The compiled data at the end.
Yeah, at the end.
Yeah.
Okay, but not the individual, say, data records themselves?
No, not at all. In fact, I'm not asking anyone's email addresses. We're purposely making this anonymous. And someone said to me, well, why wouldn't people just lie? It's because there's no purpose to lie, because you're comparing yourself to other people. You're not impressing anybody by lying.
So when will this data be available?
We're probably going to release it. We're doing a free iPad app, which will be a version of this book, because the book's $50, but if people want to experience it on an iPad, it'll be completely free. And we're going to release the data at the same time.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much. Appreciate it.